I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. September of 1960, Pope John XXIII tasked Cardinal Austin Bea to compose a decree on the relationship of the Church and the Jews. 5 years later, the resulting declaration, called Nostra Aetate, would look to erase over 1,000 years of hate and forever change the Catholic Church. Hello, and thank you for joining me today on Focus on Israel. Like most Americans, I began to ask a lot of questions about what happened to our country following 9/11. As I read and talked to experts, the issues of radical Islam and the attacks on America and Israel became extremely personal to me. I realized that Israel is facing threats from nearly every corner, from Iran's nuclear weapons program to terrorist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS. So if you're a Christian, why should you care? Many Christians believe that as the Jews rejected Jesus, then God has rejected them, and that Christians have replaced them. If you truly believe the Bible is the Word of God, then you know that when He speaks of Israel, He is speaking about the land of Israel and the Jewish people, not the church. On our program today, we're going to focus on the often turbulent relationship between the Catholic Church and the Jewish people. The seed of anti-Semitism found new fertile ground after the death of Jesus of Nazareth. One of the most unfortunate epithets in the history of the Church in its relationship toward the Jewish people has been the title of Christ killers. The first accusation that the Jewish people were collectively responsible for the death of Jesus came in a sermon in 167 AD by Melito of Sardis. In his homily, Melito formulated the charge of deicide, that Jews were responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus. He proclaimed that God has been murdered. The King of Israel has been slain by an Israelite hand. The accusation against Jews as Christ killers has led to the death of many Jewish people who were often depicted as being in partnership with the devil. In turn, with the rejection of Yeshua by the Jews, Christians saw themselves as God's chosen people and the Jews as His forgotten and rejected people. Thus, the seeds of replacement theology were sown. Even though there were some Catholic leaders who went against such hatred, violence against the Jewish people spread across Europe and Russia in pogroms, inquisitions, and ultimately the Holocaust. During the dark days of Hitler, while many church leaders and Christians turned their backs, there were some who did what they could to protect and save Jewish lives. One man that was taken by the suffering and murder of the Jewish people was Bishop Roncalli. Appointed a bishop in 1925 to Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey, he soon came to know the distress and moral anguish of the Jews fleeing from their persecutors and felt an urgent need to set against it. As the preeminent Vatican diplomat in Turkey and Greece during World War II, he played a historic role in saving tens of thousands of Greek, Turkish, Bulgarian, and Hungarian Jews during the Holocaust. In Budapest alone, Roncalli rescued at least 50,000 Jews by issuing baptismal certificates. Through persistent diplomatic protests, he was able to save thousands in Slovakia. When the war was over, Bishop Roncalli, the man who would become Pope, was a changed man with a new understanding of the sufferings of the Jewish people. When he succeeded Pius XII as Pope John XXIII, he had a chance to help again. He knew he could make small changes to liturgy, but more official and authoritative actions were required, and so he ordered Cardinal Austin Bea to prepare an official declaration of the attitude of the Church toward the Jews. In 1960, the first draft of Nostra Aetate was entitled Decree on the Jews. It read, in part, "The Church, the Bride of Christ, acknowledges that according to God's mysterious design, the beginnings of her faith and election go as far back as to the Israel of the patriarchs and prophets. Thus she acknowledges that all Christian believers, children of Abraham by faith, are included in his call. Similarly, her salvation is prefigured in the deliverance of the chosen people out of Egypt. And the Church, a new creation in Christ, can never forget that she is the spiritual continuation of the people with whom, in his mercy and gracious condescension, God made the old covenant. The Church, in fact, believes that Christ, who is our peace, embraces Jews and Gentiles with one and the same love, and that he made the two one. Therefore, it would be an injustice to call this people accursed, since they are greatly beloved for the sake of the Father and the promises made to them. The Church loves this people. From them sprang Christ the Lord, who reigns in glory in heaven. From them sprang the Virgin Mary, mother of all Christians. From them came the apostles, the pillars and bulwark of the Church. Furthermore, the Church believes in the union of the Jewish people with herself as an integral part of Christian hope. With unshaken faith and deep longing, the Church awaits union with this people. As the Church, like a mother, condemns most severely injustices committed against innocent people everywhere, so she raises her voice in loud protest against all wrongs done to Jews, whether in the past or in our time. Whoever despises or persecutes this people does injury to the Catholic Church. This admission of past sins and false beliefs against the Jewish people was met with controversy within the Church, as not all agreed with this new stance. Although Pope John would not live to see the final draft of Nostra Aetate, his help during the Holocaust, his warmth and affection for the Jewish people, and his determination to move the Church into a new era of Catholic-Jewish relations is why he would be called the Pope of the Jews. During a recent trip to New York, I was honored to speak with Bill Donahue, the president of the Catholic League. Legatus magazine stated that Bill Donahue might just be the hardest working man in the Catholic Church, with the exception of Pope Francis, of course. Not only has the New York City native been at the helm of the Catholic League for a full 26 years, but he is busy writing a new book while regularly writing to the defense of Catholics across the country, beset by a hostile culture and media. Mr. Donahue gave me some insight on the significance of Nostra Aetate.
Well, I think to some extent, in all honesty, Nostra Aetate got somewhat eclipsed in the minds of many Catholics at the time, not today. Today, I think it's gotten the significance it deserved back then. Quite frankly, as a young Catholic at the time, we were impressed by a lot of the changes that were going on. Some of them were just symbolic, such as no meat on Friday, but the nuns losing their habit and a lot of changes going on which were unsettling to a lot of Catholics. That, quite frankly, was something that overrode some of these other concerns. Now, the issue that we're talking about is more important in the larger realm of things, but I remember back at that time, there was a state of confusion, and still is to some extent with Catholics, about sometimes the changes came on too quickly. We could argue forever whether it was the spirit of Vatican II, whether it was the actual 16 documents, or whatever. But here's where it means so much to me, is that this was basically the clearest exposition of the Catholic denunciation of anti-Semitism. And I'm very proud of the fact that on December the 10th of 2015, the 50th anniversary, it was even more explicit. Now we're being told that we have to fight anti-Semitism. It is not good enough to say that supersessionism is nonsense. The covenant has never been revoked. We know that. As Francis has said, you can't be a Christian and be an anti-Semite. If you are, you're a hypocrite, you're a liar. There's no place for you in the Christian world. That needs to be said over and over again. I think so what's happened in 2015, in the 50th year celebration, even punctuates beyond what happened in 1965. So I think it's a moment for Catholics. I find very few Catholics today who have any problem with it. I say back then in the 60s, they didn't really have that kind of conversation, at least in the young circles that I dealt with at that time. But most Catholics today, of course, are very proud of it. I remember going to an ADL dinner in honor of John Cardinal O'Connor here a number of years ago. And this was the centerpiece of the discussion, and how Nostra Aetate did open the doors and the eyes of Catholics who perhaps themselves were, I'm not saying they were guilty per se of anti-Semitism. I don't think they were alert to it. I don't think they were sensitive to it. And while Nazism, as Ed Koch said, is what was responsible for the Holocaust, there's an anti-Judaic element there in Catholicism which had to be addressed. And wherever you find any kind of expression of bigotry, it has to be condemned by any reasonable person, and certainly by the Catholic Church, beginning at the hierarchy. Nostra Aetate very explicitly rejected this idea of the collectivization of guilt, that somehow Jews were all responsible for the killing of Christ then, and then fast forward into 2017. But even beyond that, I think it's been taught today in the Catholic schools and elsewhere that this idea is insane, that it's palpably unjust to collectivize the guilt. And Nostra Aetate was the springboard for that. It clarified what had been understood in the past, and today I'm very proud of the fact that that's gone into the vector of change has gone even beyond that. Today you'd have to be really a marginalized Catholic to entertain that kind of insanity. Well, the good news is that in the second century, this heretic, Marcion, was labeled as such. He's trying to say that the Old Covenant is nonsense, that it's invalid, that we should just simply dispense with it. He was entertaining what we would now call supersessionism, the idea of replacement, that we have the New Testament and then we can just discard the Old Testament. The good news is that he was condemned as a heretic in the second century by the Church Fathers. The bad news is most Catholics are unaware of it, and certainly throughout the ages, as you get into the Middle Ages and into the more modern times, most Catholics are unaware of this. It needs to be restated. That's where Nostra Aetate is so important. I'm not saying that it was glacial news in one sense, but it crystallized. It took what knowing, reasonable Catholics, thoughtful Catholics knew was wrong all along, anti-Semitism, and it made it formal. And it did it in the context of Vatican II, and of course it's become ever more popular since that time, and I'm proud of what's happened. But you go back in church history, you will find these heretics out there, and you'll still see people today, including some Catholics who may get on the internet, which has unfortunately become the Wild Wild West, and some of these people out there, they claim to represent all these Catholics. The good news is they don't. But you do have some real nut jobs out there, some real wing nuts out there trying to maintain that somehow there's this Old Testament which should be discounted. There's no Old Covenant, it needs to be revoked. As Pope Francis has said, you can't be a Christian and be an anti-Semite. The Old Covenant was never revoked, and the Church has made that explicit, and should do so with more regularity.
This month marks the 70th anniversary of the historic Declaration of the State of Israel. God's sovereign hand can be seen all over this land. Included in the celebrations is the opening of the American Embassy right here in Jerusalem. In honor of this celebration, PJTN is offering a special 70th anniversary package, which includes a captivating new book and an award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews never ends only with the Jews. We must strongly stand against any anti-Semitic trends, for if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org. On May 6, 2006, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum mourned the passing of Sister Rose Thering, a passionate voice against anti-Semitism and a pioneer in Catholic-Jewish relations. In a presentation on Nostra Aetate at the museum in December 2005, scholar Judith Bonnke said, "Sister Rose was a feisty nun who carried out the first self-study of Roman Catholic textbooks and teachers' manuals in terms of how they portrayed Jews and Judaism. And that study provided the basis of the American Jewish Committee's first initiative to the Vatican Council." A Dominican nun from Wisconsin, Sister Rose submitted her dissertation to the St. Louis University in 1961 on the negative portrayal of Jews and Judaism that was widespread in Catholic teaching materials. The results of her scholarship were shared with Cardinal Austin Bea in Rome, who was then preparing the statement on the Jews, Nostra Aetate. Up next, we'll hear from Sister Rose from the acclaimed 2004 documentary film, Sister Rose's Passion, which portrayed her fight against anti-Jewish prejudice and explored the legacy of her work throughout the Catholic Church.
Why did the Jews commit the great sin of putting God himself to death? The Jews as a nation refused to accept Christ, and since this time they have been wanderers on the earth. The worst deed of the Jewish people was the murder of the Messiah. Jews, evidently, were not loved by God. In my religion books, it sounded as if somehow they missed the boat.
the Jews were responsible for the death of Christ, as far as I remember from the Catholic school that I went to.
I guess the Catholic Church at the time when I was little said that the Jews were responsible for Jesus' death.
Jesus was killed by the Jews.
The Jews were responsible.
I was taught that Jesus was killed by Jews.
The Jews? The Jews.
Anti-Semitism, anti-Jewishness, was prevalent in America at that time. There were many instances when Christians did not care. Very few did. When I went with my guide to Auschwitz, my guide said to me, "Rose, you could smell the burning flesh 30 miles away, so you can't say that people didn't know about it."
The Gospel of Matthew famously has the Jewish crowd say, "His blood be upon us and upon our children." Does this mean that from generation to generation, Jesus' blood is upon the Jews? That's what Catholicism taught until 1965.
Jews were concerned for many years about how they were portrayed in Christian educational materials, because Jews always believed that one of the potent sources of anti-Semitism was a negative and hostile tradition of teaching and preaching about Jews and Judaism.
My mentor came to me and said, "Rose, I've seen your transcript." He said, "We're doing a study here of ourselves as Catholics. And how do we present ourselves in the books that we use in the classroom?" And I ordered the most widely used Catholic religion teaching materials, and to my sorrow, I found some very ugly terms. It was frightening. One statement in the books was, "Jews asked for it because they said his blood be upon us and upon our children." The whole blood libel. It was really God-killers they were calling the Jews. So who's Rose Thering that she thinks she can go into these books, study them, present them in another way?
I remember her telling me about the atmosphere that prevailed in the hall at St. Louis University when they released the results of her study. She said you could cut the tension with a knife.
While she was making this report, one of the bishops went out and called the archdiocese and basically said there's some nun in here criticizing the church, and tried to get her put down.
The year's end brings an announcement of marked significance in church circles, as Pope John XXIII formally announces the convocation of an ecumenical council to be held in 1962. This is the first meeting of its kind to be convened in 93 years and will deal with many internal church matters.
Cardinal Bea looked at my dissertations and said, "If this is in our textbook, this has to go." In 1965, the last document to get passed was Nostra Aetate. It almost didn't get passed, and only in 15 Latin lines changed our relationship to Jews and Judaism forever, putting it to a positive relationship, which had been negative for 2,000 years. And that document said, "We Christians cannot blame Jews for the death of Jesus." And it gave the reasons why. If we come to an understanding of what anti-Semitism did in the Holocaust, then if we really come to that understanding, then we will care about other people and be courageous and try to do the right thing and be ready to speak up. And I guess that's my reason for protesting, for speaking. We need to do this. We are called to do this. I think you have to leave some things to God. Like Ruth, the story of Ruth. Ruth is not a Jew, but she was with Naomi, and she loved Naomi. And she loved the Jewish people, but she wasn't Jewish. I understand that probably individual peoples have difficulty with my so-called passion and love for God's people, which should also be their passion and their love. We are all indeed children of God. And this is something that needs to be lived every day, every moment. And it's not easy to live it every day, every moment. That is the challenge. Ruth said, "Do not ask me to abandon or forsake you, for wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge." Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God.
There is no longer any point in pretending that the horror and intensity of the violence and, yes, the hatred will soon cease. Nostra Aetate is a vital step in the right direction to stem this age-old hatred. As God reminded the prophet Obadiah that judgment would come to the descendants of Edom in the last days for standing by when their brother Jacob, Israel, was in need. Our Christian faith demands nothing less as well. Our faith, logic, and preservation should motivate us to speak out. Well, that's our program for today, and I want you to know we appreciate your support. The time to take a stand is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved with and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Call your senators, congressmen. Let your elected leaders hear from you. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive action alerts and order our films to share with family and friends. Please encourage everyone you know to tune in and become informed. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.